Hello everyone, this is Many Ninjas here. Welcome to this particular review / breakdown video of the Demoniacal Fit Mightiest Warrior, aka DF's version of what a 2.0 adult Gohan figure might look like. Something that kind of blends in both between the Dragon Ball Z Mystic / Ultimate form as well as what Super represents. Now, for those that might have not been keeping record, this particular figure, along with actually quite a few others for that matter, has been something that's been teased for, I'm going to say, well over a year plus at this point, to be quite frank. And it's only in maybe recent months that we started seeing some actual production photos of this thing being, well, produced for lack of a better term. And with some of those photos, especially certain faces in some of the pictures, being rather unflattering, to be quite frank. So we're going to be checking to see if those pictures actually match up with what the actual final released versions look like, as well as just checking to see how the actual figure holds up in terms of quality control, because that's always been a bit of thing with Demoniacal Fit stuff. Unfortunately, in terms of this review copy that I happen to have here, I'd have to say I was not having a very good time trying to get some of these joints to move at all. In terms of the neck and head there, you can see the head is moving just fine up in there, but unfortunately the neck joint itself is very stiff and kind of wasn't moving very much. Upper torso itself, stiff but still movable, not a huge amount of issue. I wish I could say the same about the shoulders and particularly the butterfly joints, because they were not moving very well on this figure, and one of them was basically stuck inside the body unless you were really pulling it out there, which is not something you really want to do with something that has a little more delicate joints, to be quite frank. Elbows themselves were fine, wrists were fine, hips, varying problems on the hips. As you can see, I got a very uneven set of splits on this particular figure when you're trying to move it outward, with the right one being kind of stuck out there. However, when you're trying to move up and down lateral motion, it's actually reversed. It's the left hip that now does not want to turn, and in fact was giving a very loud audibly squeaking sound, which is something you only hear when the plastic is much too tight, meaning that the joint fitting is very much off on there and is possibly a breakage risk down the line. Knees themselves are okay, maybe a little snug if anything, but they were functional. But ankles and toes, very tight, kind of hard to move for most part. Although messing around them a little bit longer after the review did seem to rectify some of the issue. They're not quite as overtly tight as they were. That being said though, I'd be very careful about moving the joints on this particular figure. Not something I would honestly suggest playing around with if you got any of the issues I happen to have on this one. Before we start talking about the various heads and other accessories that came with Gohan here, I want to do a quick comparison side by side with an official figure here, namely being the Broly movie Goku here. As you can see, for the most part, proportionally wise, they're honestly about the same, although in terms of the actual components used, they're not exact fits with one another. You can see that there is some slight different renderings. Upper body, definitely it's almost the same sculpt, but the upper body on Gohan is a little bit wider if anything. But color-wise, they're actually an oddly close match, which is very interesting. Now, the figure is 6 inches high, by the way. The color match is a bit interesting because in terms of the Z colors, Gohan never used anything quite that dark in terms of their blue, so this is definitely more just color picking from the newer palette used for the Super figures. Speaking of older figures, the hips definitely belong a little more with the older style hips in this case, namely the same kind of thing they used for the old now old 2.0 Super Saiyan 3 figure for Goku. As you can see, that's a lot of a closer match, although I'd say the bits of plastic that are used to separate are definitely smaller on Mightiest Warrior compared to, in this case, the bootleg of the Super Saiyan 3. While I will attempt not to repeat too much of what's been said in all the other reviews on this particular figure and its assorted issues with the faces, what I might chime in with is, at least when I noticed on my particular version of the figure, the faces for the yelling and the grimacing face are actually physically smaller for that bit. On the yelling face, it's not so much noticeable. For the grimacing face though, yeah, no, it's actually it's a visible bit smaller on there, which I actually confirmed with some calipers, that yeah, they're physically smaller than the neutral face as well as the smirking face on there, so that might actually explain why some of those faces are looking particularly off. And speaking of off, as we remove the front bit of Gohan's hair here in order to show what the super covering is, you'll notice that the heads themselves, at the back of the head, is not actually properly cast in a black plastic like you might expect, but actually is painted that way. And I think the reason you have skin-colored plastic that's been painted over for that, as well as the Super Saiyan hair, is because, honestly, the sculpts are actually about the same for the Bang version of the hair, and it's honestly a cost-cutting measure. Although it does have a bit of issues, you can see on the side of Gohan's neutral face there, the paint did rub somewhere during the transit line, and that actually caused a bit of an issue here. I'm actually having to clean that off later off camera. Now, my original plan for what you should be seeing during this bit of footage is me switching out the heads followed by switching out the hands. Unfortunately, I don't have that footage to show you, and the reason for that, it turns out, is because this figure suffers from the exact same issue as the Ultimate Fighter figure, aka their Vegeta from beforehand, being that the pegs for the neck as well as the hands are too snug in order to make things switch properly without using a lot of force. Which, considering the various issues that they had beforehand, even to the point that they had to include replacement joints for the accessory pack of Vegetos, for all the Vegito Blue stuff, makes it very surprising that we're still dealing with this now. To the point that I actually had to make this teardown video, not just for me showing off how the joints look like, but also for me trying to honestly fix this figure so it's a little more usable. As you can see, proof of concept, even for the original head that was originally stored on the figure and sent that way, it's a very snug fit, and for me trying to get the Super Saiyan head on without it being heated up, well, good luck, that's not going to happen very easily, because the neck peg is still too big despite how diminutive it is, and the fact that it's honestly smaller than the real figures or in official figure arts. As for the shoulder ones, proof of concept, butterfly joints, this is me using actually quite a bit of force in order to get it to move out, much more than should be necessary. I don't mind a stiff joint, but a stuck joint is another issue entirely. And that one is definitely a stuck joint unless you literally yank on it to get it out. The other one is just a bit stiff. Thankfully the hot water did manage to get it to move a little more, but it's still quite annoying that I have to completely work with the other one in a very forceful fashion. Elbow joint here, at least, I can't complain about the elbow joint from this figure. Those ones in the knee joints are honestly quite functional. A little bit different than what you'd expect. There's actually no metal pins or anything visible. It seems to be just pure plastic in that one, and they do their jobs just fine, so at least, hey, something is working as it's supposed to. Holds very well, can't complain. Upper and lower body, as you can see, it's still a bit on the snug side, however, it's functional. Can't argue too much. Belt material, a little stiff if anything compared to what an official figure has. That being said, once again, still functional. Admittedly, the lower body there, or the lower part of the wrist there, nothing to call about. Frankly, as you can see there is definitely a bit of a clearance issue still. It's still a little bit, the openings themselves are a little smaller than what the ball peg is, which, considering that the ball peg for the wrist is a bit smaller still, actually makes it really interesting how they managed to get this shipped out in this state in the first place. I'm actually rather annoyed. Once again, you can get it to fit there if you heat it, but you really shouldn't need to take that extra step. The hips themselves, as you can see, the heat up managed to get one of the legs, the one that wasn't moving too much outward, a little bit better. However, there is absolutely nothing that is fixing that one that is absolutely creaking there and is dangerously tight, if anything. So I will definitely have to do a lot more careful movement in order to get this figure to move. Also worth noting, there's some, well, the knee joints actually, I'll take it back, they are functional. However, they don't seem to be fitted properly. The openings seem to be a bit slight off, as you can see, especially on that one, the right leg. It's actually sticking out a bit on the body there. And there's actually some plastic wear on the knee joint now that I take a better look. Which, considering that it isn't going under that much force, I'm really wondering how it got to that point. My assorted grievances aside, at least I can say, much like the Ultimate Fighter figure, the fix for this is still very simple. Namely, you're still taking the same 2.5mm drill bit that we use in order to fix the Vegeta figure, and still using just like a quick twist or two just to expand the openings a bit more, and that will honestly do the job in order to fix the assorted hands as well as the head, in order to get them to work on just fine. As you can just see, once again, just a quick twist or two, you're basically just expanding the opening just ever so slightly in order to remove a little bit of plastic, and as you can see, the new hand now fits and comes off easily enough without threading the joint anymore. And you just have to repeat that for the various hands. In this case, we're doing with the thumbs up hand because you can't have a Gohan without its thumbs up, and with a quick turn or two, no effort really at all, comes on and off easily enough, presto, done. Honestly, you're going to use the same 2.5mm drill bit in order to fix the heads in this case, which I honestly did for both of them, although I'm just doing the Super Saiyan one on camera here. So a quick twist or two and a quick measurement check, and, well, as you can see with almost no work whatsoever, the Super Saiyan head will now fit on the body on there. Although I did a little extra drill or a little extra twist after this in order to make the head fit a smidge better, with still a little loosey-goosey on top, as you can see. But it was a quick fix. That's my point. Now, for anyone still watching the video at this point, I have a surprise for you. Reproduction Edition Ultimate Fighter, aka their second run of this particular Vegito figure. Now, you might be wondering, what's the difference between this and the original run? Well, hypothetically on this one, they were supposed to include some fixes from the original run which definitely had some production issues, namely the wrist joints and the neck joints, which were actually notably fragile in a lot of cases and would end up snapping because of the tightness and pressure when you were trying to change the hands and the heads. Hypothetically, those and a few other things were supposed to have been addressed. That being said, I'm not sure I would agree with that assessment. And especially production-wise, this figure still has a ton of issues compared to not just the original one, but literally the same kind of issues that I saw with the Gohan we were literally just talking about. Namely, the butterfly joints are very stiff, if not stuck. In fact, they're stuck in the exact same side as on Gohan, and the hips also can't do a proper splits. Odd enough, having the exact same issue on the same side, all on the right side of the figure, which is actually really weird and coincidental on that one. Toe joints are functional, just very stiff on that one. Knee joints and elbows, can't argue too much, they work just fine on this one. Maybe a little stiff, if anything, on that one. Toe joints are not too bad. Maybe the neck joint has a little bit better movement on the bottom end, but it's worth noting that while the quality of the joints might be made out of a sturdier plastic on this one, the actual opening issue and being able to swap is the exact same issue we were having with the original build and with Gohan. We are having the exact same issue appear again and again. The joints are too snug. You require to heat the figure either with a heat gun or hot water in order to switch them out, otherwise you're basically tugging on the joints and hoping for the best. If it sounds like I'm slightly annoyed, yes, I am very much annoyed by this, considering that these figures are going for about the same retail price, in some cases, as the original or more legitimate official figures, which is really surprising that, especially since this is now the reproduction version, aka the second run of the figure, that we're having the exact same issue of the openings on the heads and hands being too small for the joints that they themselves are providing. It's not necessarily the price point of these figures that bother me, or the fact that they have issues, it's the fact that I have to keep talking about the exact same issues, quite frankly in these case these two, ad verbatim, again and again and again with the Demoniacal Fit figures, with the exception of maybe the Chosen ones. That's the only one that I can think of that actually came out basically no issue, at least on the one that I have. As for all these other ones, which are clearly based off of pre-existing figures, mind you, we're talking about the same issues constantly at this point in terms of build quality issues. Which, considering that this is far from their first set of releases, I'm baffled as to how we're still at this point. And I want to extend one last thank you to everyone that is still watching the video at this point. Frankly, with the length of these, I know not everyone gets to this part of the message here, as well as the 950 plus subscribers that this channel has, because apparently there are quite a few of you that enjoy hearing me ramble and rave about third-party releases and bootleg toys, which I'm very humbled by that you are willing to listen to me ramble and rave as long as I do about these things. We'll definitely be having more bootleg breakdowns to come. Catch you all later.